Infill is upside. Period. Don't let anyone tell you it isn't. I know a handful of groups that absolutely crush the infill game. But one key thing that makes these groups successful is that they buy right. Any type of upside ceases to be upside if you pay too much for it. Buying right begins with valuing right, which comprises of understanding the risks and what goes into the process. On this episode, we will take a deep dive into understanding those risks, rewards, and traps infill provides, so you can better value those opportunities and decide if these parks fit your strategy.
Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
In the last 2.5 years, Ian and I have successfully moved in about 30 homes, 12 of which being new homes. Yes, we have only been able to achieve about a home per month. The aforementioned groups move at a faster rate due to economies of scale. For example, a couple of groups bought their own moving companies. Several other groups ship setup crews around the country for decks, skirting, and rehabs. But if you are starting with nothing, like we did, infill will require clever workarounds, especially if this is your first park. Chapter 1. What it takes. To move in a home, first you will need a reasonably level, clean, and sizable lot, complete with functional water, sewer, and electrical connections that can pass all the zoning requirements. Be careful in your due diligence and make sure all infrastructure works. Faulty lines can cost thousands to fix and or replace and occur more frequently than you'd think. Don't assume zoning will just agree with you. Always check with zoning and permitting to be sure you can even bring homes in, as well as discover what they will need to approve your infill project. Once you verify the viability to place a home, obviously then you need a home. Sourcing homes has proven a difficult endeavor for me over the years. Used homes sell quickly or command obnoxiously high prices. Low supply of used home inventory slows everything down and adds a level of unpredictability and variability to the process. You'll never know what quality of used home you really have until you start the rehab. New homes require dealer's licenses to purchase, which could take months and thousands of additional dollars to acquire. By the way, homes twist, contort, and take a beating during a move. So expect even new homes to have at least some light rehab. Next, you'll need a mover, an installer, and contractors to connect the home to the water, sewer, and electrical connections on site, and to build decks, place skirting, not to mention complete the rehab itself. You may need a different contractor for each of those steps too, which means you'll need to be well connected. Once you have the home and the team in place, you'll need to pay any back taxes present associated with the home and procure a moving permit, likely for both the outgoing county and the incoming county. Do not expect your mover to do this. Sure, some will, and you'll never have to worry. Others operate via honor amongst thieves. And you may find yourself unable to get an electrical permit because you failed to verify your mover got the appropriate moving permit. Just FYI, you'll most likely need the title as well in your name to obtain the moving permit to begin with, which may set you back several weeks. By the way, unless you trust your contractors and have done business with them many times before, do not pay them until the job is complete. Getting someone back out after they've been paid can be like pulling teeth, but worse, because you've lost all your leverage over them. After the home is placed and ready, you'll have to pass the inspections. Each county forces different regulations upon you, so it can be hard to know how easy or difficult they'll be to work with until after you buy the park and begin moving homes in. All those moving parts require management and may make your head spin at times. As you can assume, this process takes time, knowledge, a network of trustworthy contractors, and money. And that's just to get the home there and ready. The lease-up process may also prove difficult, time-consuming, and expensive. If you build it, they will come. Won't always be the case. Chapter 2. Risks. Risks include execution risk, sourcing risk, time risk, monetary risk, liability risk, governmental risk, market risk, and labor risk. Execution risk. Lots of steps need to be completed and in a certain order. Otherwise, your lot will sit vacant and unusable. One snag in that long process may debilitate your entire operation, so be sure you factor in that downside risk. For people like us, when we started off, I'd recommend looking at infill as the cherry on top, not the key driver making the deal attractive, given that certain thresholds of skill, experience, money, and networking will be required to ensure proper execution. Sourcing risk. New home manufacturers get backordered. Used markets dry up. Delays will happen. You can't assume that just because you already have your dealer's license and the cash, that the homes will be easy to find and move in on time. Which leads us to time risk. Again, something as simple as a delay in obtaining a dealer's license may set you back months. If your pro forma relies on quick infill and lease up, you may be exposing yourself to an uncomfortable amount of time in the red. Monetary risks. We've spent about $15,000 to $30,000 per used home to move in. Let's call it $20,000 per home. Infilling 10 homes would mean $200,000 cash. Typically, home buyers don't have $20,000 cash, meaning they'll have to get a loan or you'll have to carry the paper somehow. Both come with risks. If they obtain their own loan and default, you could wind up bidding on your own home, desperately fighting off mobile home poachers. If you carry the paper, that too comes with its own assortment of risks. But in either case, you will have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars locked up in homes that won't be paid back to you for years. That's a serious consideration, especially since it's really difficult to find any bank willing to help you with a loan for home move-in, especially for smaller communities. Even the cash program has some serious drawbacks that we'll discuss later. Liability risk. At any given time, someone could get hurt. And lawyers will chase the entity with the most money, which will almost always be you, the mobile home park owner. If the home falls apart, an unlicensed contractor gets hurt or hurts someone else, a deck collapses, etc., you may be faced with a lawsuit. Insurance doesn't cover everything, and an LLC may actually not protect you personally from everything. Be aware. Governmental risk. Imagine having everything go perfectly until it's time to turn the power on, only to find that you can't turn the power on because the local government is holding the permit. This has happened to us. We once had a home sit for 3 months over someone being completely silly at the local permitting office. We eventually leveraged a relationship to get around that difficult person, and we haven't had issues since. But one can't simply assume the local government will always be on your side or that they'll come around. This all comes back to time. This process takes time, and often way more than you'd expect. Market risk. Believe it or not, we have had homes sit for long periods of time simply because they were too nice. Yes, too nice. We've also struck out for months trying to sell prospective tenants on the cash program. Look, I have friends that absolutely clean up using the cash program, but for whatever reason, the market we tried it in just didn't respond well to it. You'll find that each sub-market will have its own nuances and will respond differently to marketing. More tertiary markets may prove near impossible to find qualified residents. A company going under may sink an entire town. Demand fluctuates. Sure, mobile home parks are recession resistant, but bad real estate sometimes is just bad real estate. Meaning about no matter what you do, you will always struggle finding people to move in. Labor risk. If you have been thinking this whole episode, this is great, but I'm hiring this out, then let me tell you, finding someone that checks all of the requisite boxes for the skill sets necessary to pull a big project like this off is difficult. And even if you find that unicorn, this person will likely be expensive. And even if you find the right person for the right price, what happens if they leave? Finding talent can be extremely difficult. You better make sure up front you have the right person. Otherwise, the scramble after closing could sink your entire operation. Chapter 3. Skills you'll need. You will need a mix of skills to complete infilling on your own. Regardless if you plan to hire out or do it yourself, you should be aware of the necessary skills. These skills include vetting contractors, working with government, project management, lease-up, sales, marketing, negotiation, tenant screening, inspecting used homes, etc. Vetting contractors should be an episode of its own. It can be really, really tough to find trustworthy people that work in a timely manner and for a reasonable price. Local governments behave politically, so you'll either have to know how to cozy up to them or pay for someone who has that relationship already. Otherwise, you may get boxed out. And be careful. You'll find some local governments are shockingly corrupt. Project management skills will help streamline the infill process. Sure, project management may seem simple, but it's a discipline of its own. It may be worth your time to take a class or pick up a book on project management. Lots of information exists that will help you establish processes that streamline projects. Lease-up really includes sales, marketing, persuasion, and tenant screening. This, too, deserves its own episode. We've had to search for property managers before. Just because someone has experience as a property manager does not mean they'll be good. I was once hired to clean up a former property manager's mess. Even a highly experienced, bigger company that knows what they're doing can make hiring mistakes. So can you. And really, so will you. As we all will hire a dud one day if we stick around long enough. It's unrealistic to think one can completely avoid mistakes, so the focus really should rather be on quickly identifying and remedying the mistakes we've made. Inspecting used homes. You absolutely must put eyes on a used home before buying it. But even then, mistakes may happen. People showing homes will put couches over damaged floors, pictures over drywall issues, paint over roof leaks, remove electrical panels, water heaters, and HVACs after you've bought, but before you've moved the home. I once walked through what I was told was a 3-bedroom home and somehow walked out not noticing it only had 2 bedrooms. Your rehab crew will at times underestimate the damage they see during an inspection, sometimes by thousands of dollars. Mistakes and miscalculations will occur, but putting eyes on a home can help you avoid at least some of that risk. Even a brief walkthrough can help you identify roof damage, electrical issues, wood rot, insulation gaps, faulty water or sewer lines, etc. But really, the biggest thing is making sure you can actually move the home, as you can address a lot of those issues after the fact. We once had a home fall apart because the homeowner installed a shingle roof over a metal roof and the steel frame snapped. You've always got to have your mover inspect the frame and viability of moving a home. But we did that for that home. So even then, unexpected bad news can occur. By the way, that one incident set us back over $4,000. Chapter 4. Understanding what is and what is not upside. So, why are the pads vacant? Do you buy the line that the owner would absolutely have filled it in if they were younger, or that their heart just wasn't in it anymore? There's a reason those pads are vacant. Sometimes those reasons are bad news for you. Sure, maybe they didn't have the time, money, skill, or motivation to go through all of what I've discussed. Value comes from doing something others can't or won't do, and maybe that's your upside. The prior owner couldn't and or didn't want to complete the infill. Or maybe not. We've seen plant overgrowth of a vacant pad ruin infrastructure, not to mention cost thousands to clear up and clean up. We've seen governments shut down portions of parks or use eminent domain to usurp land. We've seen pads so small, most RVs wouldn't fit there. Beyond viability concerns, upside all comes down to execution and price. We've covered the execution part. Now let's talk price. If your end game is to exit at, say, $40,000 a pad, and you've bought the entire property at $20,000 a pad, and it costs $20,000 per pad to infill, then you'll essentially break even. Sure, you'll achieve cash flow that'll help offset that basis, but you're exposed to a ton of risk over a longer period of time for really not that much reward. If you're a large company or a medium to large fund, you may have the cash and low cost of capital necessary for a large infill project to make sense. If you started with nothing, like us, it may never make sense to pay up for vacant pads. Banks will also count vacant pads as actual vacancy. Think about that. You could have a completely full, stable winner of a property struggle to get financing simply because zoning says the property has more viable pads than it actually does. Chapter 5. Valuing vacant pads. If you're starting with nothing, always consider the price per occupied lot, not per total lot. In other words, if you have 100 lots, but 50 homes, a bank will see that as 50% vacant. A $3 million purchase price for that property may sound reasonable until you realize that's $30,000 per pad and $60,000 per occupied pad. If you are striving to pay investors, say, an 8% preferred return, I would encourage you to play with a serious downside risk scenario generator and account for a total failure of any infill at all. If you don't need to hit strong yield up front, or you have a construction loan or some other creative type of debt to ease with the heavy upfront costs, you can get a bit more aggressive on your pricing. Regardless of where you fall on this spectrum, a clear end game and expectations will help you make the right decision. You'll need to consider yield, timing of that yield, reversion, cash flow, and downside mitigation. I can't really give you a magic bullet for how to value vacant pads, as each person and each company's end game and overall strategy will be different. But what I will say is with high risk comes high reward. Infill is definitely risky and definitely requires a lot of time and capital. But where there is difficulty, there is value to be achieved. If I haven't practically screamed how much work infilling vacant pads can be, let me share with you a story to illustrate the depth of a project we've had. We bought La Costa Mobile Home Park, a 527-lot community with about 286 homes and roughly 245 tenants, in June of 2017 via a joint venture. We quickly realized we needed to JV, as banks viewed La Costa as 48% occupied, even though close to 100 of those pads weren't even developed out. Raising money for a good deal is relatively easy. Raising debt for a park-owned home heavy, vacant pad heavy, operational turnaround proved nearly impossible, especially for two 20-somethings with just two significantly smaller mobile home parks under their belts. Picking the right group to partner with on our deal made life easy. First, they handled all accounting, dealer's license shenanigans, and really all major administrative headaches, allowing Ian and I to be field soldiers executing on the turnaround. We didn't appreciate how much of a burden our JV partner removed from us until our next big project, which we handled ourselves. Over the course of 14 months, Ian and I traded off living in a double wide on site, working as our own property managers and project managers, pushing to infill this large community. We marketed to homeowners looking to move their homes into our community, but in 14 months, we only ended up finding 2 people. So that really wasn't a viable go-to for a 100-plus pad vacant infill game. We bought 12 Clayton homes and attempted to sell them via the cash program. For whatever reason, nearly 90 days into it, we had sold 0. So we switched to a lease option and we started leasing them up faster than homes were ready. This isn't to say the cash program is flawed, but rather I'm saying you need to be acutely aware of your submarket and its tendencies, and even then, you may need to switch strategies on a dime if your initial assumptions prove wrong. Clayton Homes experienced a serious backorder issue when we bought our 12 homes. They trickled in slowly over the course of 12 months. Maybe if we had ordered more, things would have moved faster, or maybe not. Regardless, that portion of infill proved slow and cumbersome. Eventually, we persuaded the local government to allow us to transition some vacant pads to RVs. For not even $2,000, we were able to switch connections from mobile home to RV, and with some tinkering of marketing, we eventually experienced an explosion of interest. RV definitely took a lot of ongoing effort, but that proved a wonderfully lucrative endeavor for all people involved. I've discussed a lot of what Ian and I did at La Costa on other episodes, so I won't revisit those details, but what I will say is that probably the biggest reason La Costa proved successful for everyone involved was because we bought it right. La Costa was a win for the seller, the tenants, and us, as is. Had La Costa relied heavily upon quick infill, the entire deal would have fallen apart. Sure, it was clever of us to convince the local government to allow RV and to switch from the cash program to a lease option, but those ideas took time, money, and patience to implement. Mobile home parks in real life is about debunking the hype stories and rebuilding your game around a foundation of truth. You should chase infill opportunities. It is upside, and it can turn a good deal into a great deal. You should not, however, get hype drunk on the value add portion of infill and then pay up under the assumption you'll figure it out along the way. Sure, some companies kick serious butt with infill opportunities, but they have experience, proper funding, the staff, and patience. Yes, you might figure it out along the way, or have something like a rising market bail you out. But what happens if it doesn't? Is your end game super risky? If so, then do it. If not, I'd strongly recommend you do the math and view vacant pads as the cherry on top, not the main driver of the deal. Entrepreneurs make mistakes, but with the overwhelming amount of free information out there, you don't have to be doomed to making those same mistakes. You just have to find a consolidated version of the most important information. What if I told you I'll gift you all of my DD mistakes I've made over the years for free? Just leave me a 5-star review, screenshot the review after it goes live, and email it to me at my website, archimedesgrp.com. Afterwards, join our Facebook group, Mobile Home Park Mastermind. You'll find hundreds of other mobile home park owners sharing ideas, contractors, and deals. It's free to join, and we would absolutely love having you join us.